Syria strongly condemned the wave of explosions that hit brotherly Iraq yesterday. And terrorism once again hits hospitals and schools, killing dozens of victims and wounding others in Aleppo. The Syrian Army chases terrorists at their hideouts and a large amounts of weapons confiscated. And the Lebanese terrorist Mohammed Hussein Faris admits smuggling weapons, journalists and terrorists into Syria. Good afternoon. The Foreign Ministry in the Syrian Arab Republic strongly condemned the series of explosions that hit several areas in brotherly Iraq yesterday, causing the death of 100 people in terrorist attacks that targeted all installations, military and commercial institutions. The ministry asserted in its statement that such attacks were aimed at disrupting security and stability and killing innocent Iraqis without any discrimination. These attacks would never break the solid will of the Iraqi people to develop their country and preserve its stability. The ministry gave warm condolences to the Iraqi people and expressed full solidarity and sympathy with the families of the victims and wished the wounded victims speedy recovery. An official source in Aleppo governorate asserted that the explosion before Al Hayat hospital in the quarter of the municipal stadium in Aleppo led to the death of 30 citizens, including women, children and 2 security policemen, and the wounding of 64 others. The explosion was caused by a booby-trapped medium-sized vehicle carrying more than 1 ton of highly explosive materials. The explosion caused a hole 6 meters deep. The damage extended to 50 meters and hit the buildings of 2 hospitals, a school and other buildings nearby. Another explosion happened at the same time near another school in the martyrs' quarters. It was caused by a booby-trapped vehicle carrying 500 kilograms of explosives. It led to the death of 3 citizens, including a 10-year-old girl, and the wounding of 6 others.
Once again, terrorism hits the city of Aleppo, and once again many innocent people are killed for having no fault but for rejecting that Wahhabi thinking and those who entered to tear off the Syrian mosaic.
May God curse them. Is that freedom? Here we have elderly women who were killed. Is that freedom? There are bodies on the ground. Women who were disabled.
The attack targeted 3 hospitals, including a school for a displaced, causing great destruction. I ask Hamad, Erdogan and Al Saud, whom are you targeting? This is Aleppo, which is steadfast, and it will remain steadfast. It will rid itself from all the terrorists that were sent from all parts of the world.
Targeting that place indicates how criminal the mind which masters the attack is. For detonating a car bomb with 1,000 kilograms of explosives in Al Malab neighborhood near Al Hayat Hospital, the Central Hospital and Al Nusur Zahabiya School, not far from the Global Ball Square, killing and wounding tens of thousands innocent people, apart from leaving heavy damages in both hospitals, the school, as well as the nearby buildings.
They blew off my son by the blast. 3 car bombs. The Israelis and the Americans. God curse them. God curse them. Forever I will curse them. My son was playing in the street. They blew him off using 3 car bombs.
The screens go off high, rejecting terrorism and believing in the strength of the Syrian Arab Army and its ability to fight terrorism and its supporters and financiers of all sheikhs and those who lead them. The determination of the Syrian people, which is much stronger than the dark thinking of terrorism, will no doubt triumph eventually.
following clashes between the Syrian armed forces and the terrorist groups in Al Tadamun neighborhood in Damascus, which resulted in the death of a number of terrorists, and the armed forces broke into a number of terrorists' hideouts. They found stolen medical equipment used for the terrorists to treat them, in addition to a factory for manufacturing explosive devices and military uniforms. After following up information given by the people, a unit of our armed forces stormed several hideouts of terrorists in the quarter of Jurat al-Shayyah and Homs. The clash led to heavy casualties among the terrorists, in addition to destruction of 2 storehouses full of ammunition that they used in their attacks and sabotage crimes. In Al-Aqsair farms on Al-Adra highway in the area of Burqat Hamza, a unit of our armed forces carried out a large operation that led to the death of a large number of terrorists, including Khalid Ahmad Omar, Muhammad Yusuf Omar, and Hussein Shahda Omar. Our armed forces also clashed with a terrorist group in Al-Aqsair countryside, killing many terrorists, including Wa'il Abdul Halim Zakaria, Muhammad Abdul Rahim Qastarawi, and Ali Muhammad Qastarawi. In Hama, authorities stormed a terrorist hideout in Tel Qartal on the southern side of the governorate and arrested several terrorists with their weapons in cooperation with the people in that area. A source in the governorate said that the weapons confiscated included machine guns and various pistols of various calibers with their ammunition. In Dar'a, authorities carried out an operation in Al-Ahrak town, killing a number of terrorists and destroying 2 of their cars, in addition to confiscating various types of weapons. An official source said that the confiscated weapons included 32 anti-tank mines and their detonators, 3 Israeli-made Lao launchers with their shells, 11 RPGs and 10 batteries used for remote detonation, in addition to 2,117 bullets and the weapons and ammunitions. On the other hand, military engineering units dismantled a 200-kilogram explosive device that was planted by terrorists on Jamle Nafa' main street in Dar'a countryside. An official source said that the bodies of Khalil Hussein Muhammad Salim Sarraj Ahmad were identified among the dead in the operation. Authorities destroyed hideouts of armed terrorist groups in the village of Serja and Deir Sumbul in Al-Zawiya mountain in Idlib. A source at the governorate said that these hideouts were used by the terrorists to torture and kill civilians. The attack resulted in the death of tens of terrorists and the injury of many others. Among the terrorists who were killed were Deeb Yusuf Zriq and Musa Habib Abu Habib. 35 persons from Damascus and its countryside and 7 persons from Homs who were involved in recent events in Syria but did not commit murder were released after pledging not to carry arms or take part in any sabotaging acts in the future. They pledged not to return to the acts they had previously committed. A number of the released said that the release signals a new beginning for them to move on with their lives and take part in building the society. The French surgeon Jacques Pierre, one of the founders of the Organization of Doctors Without Borders, who treated mercenary terrorists in Aleppo, said that some of those fighters were trying to turn Syria into a religious state, believing that they were fighting a holy war. After returning from Syria, where he stayed for a fortnight and worked recently and secretly in a hospital in Aleppo. He said that what he saw was different from the situation in Homs and Idlib last year. Nearly 60% of those he treated this time came from abroad and belonged to Al-Qaeda organization. The Spanish paper El Mundo asserted that the suicide terrorist who appeared in a video driving a lorry and exploding it in Idlib was a Spanish citizen of a Moroccan origin who worked as a taxi driver. The Spanish security forces identified the person, who is called the Northern Abu Musab. He is from Sabta. He is also known as Rashid Hussein Muhammad. He was identified from traces of a wound in his arm. The day in which he appeared in the video was the same day when his family in Sabta was contacted from Syria to be told of his death. The Lebanese criminal terrorist Mohammed Hussein Faris admitted that he smuggled weapons, journalists and armed terrorists into Syria. He also carried out terrorist acts against Syrian citizens.
محمد حسان فارس الأم جميلة تولد 85.
The Lebanese criminal terrorist Mahmoud Hussein Faris was born in Arsal in 1985. He lived in the village of Jussiye. The leader of the largest terrorist group in that village, Ahmed Amoun, asked him to smuggle weapons into Syria together with others of the Syrian nationality. They used to take the weapons from someone called Khalid Lahjera and smuggle them through illegal crossing points. That person gave them £35,000 for each smuggled load. They also smuggled journalists and armed fighters from several nationalities, as they were instructed not to return from the crossing point through which they infiltrated into Syria. They smuggled materials were given to someone called Bilal al-Jarban from Luqsir. He contacted them and they went to him and found that he had a wounded journalist, smuggled him and called the doctor to treat him. They smuggled nearly 6 armed terrorists to the school of Jussiye, which contained 250 armed people. One morning, the leader of the terrorist group ordered them to attack the village of Al-Hsabiye, so they besieged it and waged the attack. They opened fire in order to force people there to surrender or to leave the area. A group of them stood on subsidiary highway in order to kill anyone who went in or out of that village. Next day, the number of armed terrorists stormed the houses to steal their contents. They counted the victims and found 14 dead people, including women, children, and young people.
More details about Syria and the region on our website www.syriaonline.sy. For now, stay with us. After the break, Vani with the economy and finance news.
Good afternoon. Prime Minister Dr. Wael Al-Halqi stressed the importance of the health sector and its vital role in carrying out its duties despite the attacks of armed terrorist groups. Dr. Al-Halqi said during his meeting with head of the Syrian Doctors Union, Dr. Abdul Qadir Hassan, and members of the Union's Central Council that the government is exerting great efforts to meet the needs of the health sector, in addition to the basic needs of the Syrian people. He gave a review of the measures adopted by the government to help the families affected by the current crisis and the preparations underway to hold a National Reconciliation Conference with the aim of solving the crisis in peaceful means. For his part, Dr. Abdul Qadir Hassan underlined the doctors' commitment to carrying out their duty and enhancing Syria's steadfastness. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization's experts in Damascus asserted the importance of government institutions' positive involvement in local markets during crises, especially that Syria is an agricultural country with the agricultural sector's contribution reaching 30% of its GDP during the previous years and included 50% of the workforce, pointing out that Syria achieved self-sufficiency for most of the agricultural products and exports the surplus of some of its strategic crops, such as wheat, cotton, and citrus. Regarding governmental institutions, the General Establishment for Storage and Marketing has an important role during this crisis because it owns storehouses for basic materials that is sufficient for several months, in addition to providing fresh materials on a daily basis, since commodities are being exchanged at 500 halls and 70 wholesale centers, alongside 105 vehicles that distribute their necessary commodities where there are no special halls and outlets. The director of the Syrian Company for Tourism, Rana Ayrut, stressed that their mission is to embody the trends of the ministry in order to enable the company to play its role in stimulating the local tourism, showing that the most important formula which they are studying currently includes establishing touristic projects in Sahnaya, where the company owns land, pointing out that they will consult for providing new job opportunities to support economic and social development. The Minister of Industry, Dr. Adnan Al-Sukhni, with members of the Board of Directors in the Chamber of Industry of Damascus and its countryside, discussed the problems which are facing the industrialists and the national industry because of sanctions and the terrorist attacks on the industrial establishments. As they discussed facing these problems with finding solutions, emphasizing the role of the industrialists in subsidizing the national economy, the Minister pointed out to the importance of collaboration